Good morning. Thank you for joining today's session on free OpManager network training series. Before we start, I would like to get a quick confirmation from you all. If you can hear me well and see the presentation slide, please use the webinar chat panel and type yes. So I will wait for a couple of confirmation and then I'll get started. Can everyone hear me? All right, as many of you have confirmed, let's get started. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Suresh Bhagavati, evangelist for Manage Engine IT Operations Suite. I'm with Manage Engine for the past 10 years. Before I ended up in this role, I was working as a support engineer with OpManager technical team and helped customers and prospects around the globe make best use of OpManager in the organization. So with all this
Yo,
experience, I'm here doing a 5-part free OpManager network monitoring series. And in our first topic, we are going to cover discovery and classification. So where I'll be talking about the effective way of discovering all the nodes from your network infrastructure and how to filter out the devices that you do not wish to add in your monitoring tool and stuffs like that, how to automate your monitoring after the device gets added and so on. And in the second part, we'll be covering about the server performance monitoring. The third part, we'll talk about network performance monitoring, followed by effective fault management and IT automation. And in the last part, we'll be discussing about the network maps, reports, and best practices. So this will happen every Wednesday in the same time, and recorded version of this webinar will be hosted on our training page. You can see the link in the slide, and also the recorded version along with the training material will be emailed to you within 24 hours time. So you can refer this to your friends or colleagues who missed to join today's session, or also you can use this for later reference. All right. So let's get started with our part one topic, discovery and classification. Let me quickly run through the agenda for today's session. First, I'll be talking about the prerequisite for installing OpManager. So what should you require before installing OpManager? So I will talk about the minimum system requirement for setting up OpManager. And on the security aspects, what are the ports and protocols used by OpManager? So I'll also talk about that. So you need to make sure that all these ports and protocols are not blocked by a firewall. And next, adding devices into OpManager. So here I'll be discussing about the various ways of adding devices into your network for monitoring and discovery filters. How do you apply filters to ignore devices that you do not wish to add an OpManager, and using rule engine to automate configurations. Say for example, once you add the devices for monitoring, you will set up notification profile, or you will group the devices into the specific business view groups, or you wanted to set up monitoring or set up process or service monitoring for set up devices. And I'm going to explain the different ways of adding these tasks as a schedule and get that associated to the discovery profile, so that as and when the device gets added to your monitoring tool, all these tasks that you have added as a rule engine gets applied to the device. So as and when the device gets added, all the tasks that you will perform after the device added will be automated and done as and when the device gets added to the tool. And next, I'll be talking about the discovery schedule and reports. So you wanted to schedule a network scan. So on a later date, any active device on the network will be scanned and added to OpManager tool for monitoring. And also you will have discovery reports to understand who did the network scan, how many devices are added, how many devices are still pending for addition, and so on. And fixing unknown devices. So you would have experienced this issues. Sometimes you miss certain protocols, or sometimes you miss certain ports that blocks the firewall, and do not let auth manager to contact the devices. So in that case, the devices that cannot be contacted will be falling under the category as unknown, where we don't know who is the vendor, we don't know who's what category it is, which model it is, and so on. So I'm going to give you some tips how to fix those problems in OpManager. And also, more importantly, we have a panelist team here. So whenever you have any questions during the course of training, you can feel free to post your questions, and our panelist team can answer your questions then and there. And also, for the benefit of the large audience, all these questions, the interesting questions, will be validated, and in the last 15 minutes we'll be discussing this so that everybody can understand what others has asked, others questions during the sessions. All right, so prerequisite for installing OpManager. Yes, I would say a minimum. I would say the device is a network environment with devices between 100 or 300 devices, or a small or medium environment, and you must have your OpManager with a minimum of 8 GB of RAM and a quad-core processor, and with 40 GB of hard disk space. And OpManager is bundled with PostgreSQL database. If you wanted to run this on a remote Microsoft SQL, you can still use this as well. And OpManager can be installed on both Linux and Windows operating system. I would say 80% of our customers are on using OpManager on a Windows operating system. And the only thing that you need to keep in mind when you host OpManager on a Linux operating system is, say, if you wanted to monitor any Windows devices using WMA protocol, and that is not going to be possible if you're hosting it on a Linux operating system. And also, you cannot monitor the Hyper-V devices through WMA as well. That's the only thing. But still, if you're okay to monitor those Windows devices using SNMP protocol, you can still go ahead with Linux operating system. And this is only a minimum system requirement to set up OpManager. And you wanted to know the exact system specification for the number of devices that you want to manage in OpManager, you can navigate to the link that is displayed on your screen. All right. And now that we know the minimum system requirement to set up OpManager, let us talk something about the security aspects. For example, you wanted to monitor the network devices through SNMP, and the default port is 161. So you need to make sure that this particular protocol and port is not blocked by a firewall. And similarly for SNMP traps, WMI, Telnet, SSH, ICMP, and syslog, web server port, all these ports are the basic ports required by OpManager. Just make sure that all these ports are not blocked by a firewall, so that when you proceed and add the devices into the tool for monitoring, you will not have any trouble during the course of discovering the devices or monitoring the devices in your OpManager tool. All right, so we'll move on to the next. So now that we know the minimum system requirement for OpManager and the ports and protocols used by OpManager, and we are ready to add the devices in OpManager. Yes. So before showing you an example in the product, I would like to briefly talk about the entire discovery cycle, and it is of 5 stages. In stage 1 is where you will feed in the device details, and there are different ways to do that. So you can do a layer 2 discovery scan, or you have all the devices details in a CSV file. You can just import the device details through a CSV import, or you have an IP range. You can mention the IP range to discover the devices, and you can do a separate device scan for vCenter or Hyper-V host or Zen server or UCS. And credentials. This is the most important section in the discovery profile. You have to make sure that all the credentials are added even before initiating the discovery scan or creating any discovery profile. So when you add the devices, when you select the input type, and the next stage, you will need to just select the credentials that you need to add or assign to the respective discovery profile. You can simply add this beforehand, or you miss to add it and you're in the process of adding a discovery profile on stage 2, you still have an option to add credentials right there. And stage 2 is where you will assign rules. As I said, you can automate configurations like setting up service monitors, process monitors, application monitors, or grouping devices, or setting up notifications. So you will do all this only after getting your inventories added to your monitoring tool. And we have an option to create this as a task and get that associated to the discovery profile itself. So as and when the device gets added to the tool, all these tasks are associated and it is done automatically. So in stage 4, you can filter out the interfaces. Yes, if you're discovering routers, switches, and it doesn't, the monitoring tool is not going to scan all the ports automatically, and you need to enable the interface scan for it. And once after enabling it, you have an option to filter this out. Say, for example, you wanted to bring in only the Ethernet interfaces for monitoring or specific type, you can choose your own type so that the rest of the interfaces are ignored during the scan, so that you don't add unnecessary load to your monitoring tool. And finally, schedule. You can schedule the devices, the discovery profile, so that, say, for example, you're creating a discovery profile in a specific IP range. Maybe you have 100 active devices today. In future, you might be adding more and more devices. So you can schedule the scan. So on a given point of time, so on every weekend or every month end, it can scan your entire network in the specific IP range, and any devices getting activated on the network on a later date will be automatically discovered by OpManager. So this is the entire discovery cycle in OpManager. So now I'm just going to explain this with a use case. So let's assume that John is the administrator of Zoho Corporation and had been given an assignment to discover the devices from various buildings. So the building one, luckily he got all the information in a CSV file and he wanted to import the CSV file in OpManager. I'm going to explain that to you in a while. And the building two, where he got all the virtual device details. So we're going to learn how to discover the virtual devices in OpManager. And the third is a remote campus, and he doesn't have any idea about the devices available in the remote campus, except she knows only the layer 2 device details, say for example the seed router information. So using the seed router information alone, let's see how we can achieve discovering the devices from the remote campus. So here on, I'm going to explain each of these steps one by one in detail. And the input, first I'm going to talk about the CSV. So as I said, the building one, the administrator got all the information in a CSV file, but the challenge is he got thousands of entries in the CSV file, but he wanted to add only 150 devices from that CSV file which are valid. The rest of the devices need to be ignored. So is there a way to ignore the unwanted devices in OpManager, which is what I'm going to show it to you in the product right now. And before that, so you go to settings and discovery. So this is where you will find the various input types, and in our example we are going to use the CSV file import. So before importing a CSV file, let me quickly show you an example of a CSV file, how does it looks like. So you go to, I have this CSV file here. So this is how you have the CSV file information, and the first row that you see will act as the column header for each of these columns, and the primary field that is required to add the devices are the device IP or the device name, and the display name is going to be the second column, and the device type. So now what you will need to do is you just need to browse the respective CSV file. Okay. And select it. Say for example, I have 2000 entries in this file and I wanted to ignore the rest of the devices and add only 150 devices. And say for example, I wanted to ignore say the category. So first I need to match the columns. So I'm matching the columns with device name, display name, and device type. Once that is done, this is not going to be enough for me to ignore the devices that I do not wish to add in OpManager. Now It is going to simply scan the entire 2000 devices available in the CSV file, but I have an option to add filters. Here you have two types. One is add and ignore. So I wanted to ignore the category desktops. So I can say desktop. So now all the desktops in this CSV file will be ignored, and say I wanted to add the devices only in the specific IP range. So I can add this. So now this is going to look in for the devices only in the specific IP range and ignore the desktops. So I can achieve this by adding only the devices that I wish to add in OpManager. And next you just need to proceed with the rest of the options like associating the credential, associating the rules, interface, and schedule. So which I'm going to talk about all these things in detail in a while. Before that, let me jump back to the slide. And in the second building, we saw that it's completely a virtual environment. And this is, let me quickly show you where you have an option to add the virtual devices separately. So the CSV scan is not going to help you discover the virtual devices because we communicate through for the virtual devices through API, and you want all the virtual server related information, and then you need to do a separate scan for the virtual devices. If you discover the devices through CSV for the virtual devices, then it's going to communicate only through the protocols like SNMP and WMI. So if you want the relevant information, then you need to make sure that just give me a moment, it takes some time to load. Let me see if I can show this from this page itself. Yes, so if you click on add VMware, then this is where you will provide the vCenter details and provide the respective credentials, and you have an option to check the test MOB connection right here. So if something fails, and you can verify the credentials and update it. And so once this is done, it will discover the ESX host associated to the virtual vCenter server and the guest VMs. So if you have 250 or 400 devices associated to that particular vCenter, in just one discovery scan, you can bring in all the maximum of the devices available in the virtual environment. And next, layer 2 discovery. Say in the remote campus, we saw that the administrators has only the seed router information. When I say seed router, that has the information of the neighboring devices. So now, with the help of the few technologies available, we can do a network scan in OpManager using the layer 2 discovery option. Let me quickly show you. So you go to maps, and this is where you have a layer 2 discovery scan, and you just provide the name, the seed router information, and the IP range for which you need to initiate a network scan for, and then select the respective SNMP credentials, whether it is SNMP v1, v2, or v3. And we use the certain protocols to pull out certain information to discover the neighboring devices, say Cisco Discovery Protocol, LLDP, IP route, FDP, or ARP, and you can put this on a scheduled interval so that at a given point of time, it will rescan the entire network, and any devices added to the network later date, it will draw a network map for you. Let me show an available map for you because it takes some time when I wanted to discover or initiate the entire scan. So this is an already discovered network through layer 2 discovery. So it's going to show how your network is connected, and this is all not you want because it just shows the map how your network is connected with each other. And you wanted to import the devices available in this list, so you simply click on settings and import devices, and here you have the list of devices available. You can select the devices and hit on discovery, so that without knowing enough device details information, just by providing the seed router information, you're discovering the entire network from the remote campus. All right. So next, we're going to talk about the REST API. So REST API is helpful if you wanted to extract data from OpManager or feed in details to OpManager without even connecting to the OpManager GUI. Say, for example, let me show you from the website. See, this is the API page that we have exposed, and as you say, let's say you have BMC Remedy and you use that BMC Remedy tool to scan your assets and manage all your licensed softwares. And at the same time, you also wanted to monitor the health and performance of those devices using OpManager. So you may have thousands of devices, thousands of servers, thousands of network devices in a BMC Remedy. And it doesn't mean that you need to do a manual scan in OpManager for all the devices that are scanned in BMC Remedy. You can simply write an API and use a script to execute this on a schedule basis, so that as and when the device is getting scanned in BMC Remedy will be automatically added to OpManager tool. So let me quickly show you an API key. So we have exposed all the API keys available here. So you just need to generate the API, REST API key in OpManager and use that. This is the API, REST API for adding device. Likewise, you want to add a notification profile, or you want to grab a report from this OpManager tool and expose that in a third-party software, you can do that. So we have exposed all the APIs here. You just go to api.opmanager.com and you have all the details available here. And next, adding device via trap. This is an interesting case. Say, for example, I don't know the IP range, and I don't. If I put the network scan in OpManager, it is going to only execute the respective discovery profile and add the devices only on so and so time. But I don't want that, because I wanted OpManager to scan the devices as and when it gets activated on the network. So how do I do that? This is an interesting case that we received from one of our customer. What he do is he will install a radio devices on a remote site on a daily basis, and he will get bunch of devices over a period of a month. And he doesn't want to do a manual scan in OpManager. So his goal is, as and when the device gets added to the network, he wants that OpManager tool to detect those devices and add that in OpManager for monitoring. So how we achieve this is through the SNMP trap. So all you need to do from the device end is just make sure that the respective settings are enabled. So you go to basic settings and system settings, and under discovery module, just make sure that enable discover devices via trap and save it. So what this is going to look for is, it is going to look for the devices that will send trap to OpManager server. So if you configure your end devices, say for example in this customer case, the radio devices, as and when he installs the radio devices in the network, it sends a SNMP trap message to OpManager server. That is how he need to configure that, and OpManager will look in for the SNMP trap for the respective devices once you enable the settings. And as and when it receives the SNMP trap message, then it is going to discover those devices and add that into the tool for monitoring. So that is how you do that. And let's go next. And we have IP range, CIDR, and add device. So this is what we saw from the discovery profile. So you see various options like IP range, CIDR to discover the entire network, and CSV import as well. And you wanted to add a single device, you can just use this add device option to add a single device. So let me use this. Okay, so now you understand the various ways of getting your devices into the tool. And the next stage is the important stage. You need to add the credentials. So these are important, and you know what are the SNMP configurations done on the network device, what are the WMI accounts used for the servers. So all that you need to make sure that all the credentials are added here. As you see, I've added many credentials here, and you wanted to add one, you just click on add credential. And if it is going to be SNMP V1 or V2, you can use this option, or for Windows you can use this option. Just make sure that the relevant information are provided and save it. And once that is done, it will be available in this list. So make sure that it is added, and then you move on to the next section. And the next section is rule engine. As I said, this helps you automate the configurations that you want to do, which I'm going to explain that with some real-time use cases. And where you can add these rule, you go to settings, configuration, and rule engine. So you go to settings, configuration, and rule engine. So this is where you will see the various rule engines already added, and you wanted to add a new rule, you can just simply click on add new rule to add it. And let me see what is the use case we got here. So every time I add a SQL server, I set up the same set of services, processes, and application monitors. That makes sense, right? So when you add a SQL server, you want to set up the same set of process monitoring, service monitoring, and application monitoring. So how do I automate this in OpManager? I have grouped all my SQL servers in a business view for our Melbourne site, and more servers will be added in future. Can I place these servers in Melbourne group automatically? So he wanted to add the devices in. So whenever a network scan is happening, and if it identifies the server as a SQL server, and this administrator wants the SQL servers to be put on the Melbourne site. And next, he wanted to set up a notification profile to trigger email notification for service down alarms. So as and when OpManager identifies any service down problems, and that need to be notified through an email. So can I set up this even before discovering the devices? Yes, you can do this. So as you see, there are various tasks that need to be done, and all this need to be done as and when the device gets added to the tool. So how do you do that? From the rule engine, just click on add new rule. So let me call this as MS SQL test 1, because I'm doing this for MS SQL. Say if the DNS name that starts with MS SQL mel, add it, and I can add multiple criteria. Say I wanted to, if the process name that contains SQL.exe, and I add it, and I can define whether it needs to match any of the following or all the following, and then I can define actions. Say I wanted to set a set of process monitors, I can add it, and I wanted to set up service monitors, I can add that. And the next, he wanted to group the devices into the specific business view group. So he wanted to group it in the Melbourne site. So I already have a group created called Melbourne. So I wanted to have this devices that matches the SQL server need to be getting into the Melbourne group. So I'm adding that to Melbourne group. And then I'm associating a notification profile email. So I wanted to receive an email notification whenever the service goes down. So I'm doing all these tasks, I'm adding all these tasks and saving it. And once I save this, you see the MS SQL test that we added is now added. So when I do the network scan, okay, I think it takes some time. So when I do the network scan, so let me quickly show it again from this page. So this is what we tried. Assume that we are discovering a network from a wide range, and so in third stage, see I have the MS SQL test 1 which I created right now. So I simply associate this rule engine task that has multiple tasks created as one rule engine. I'm just associating this with this discovery profile, and I'm just clicking on next, And the next is interface discovery. So in the network scan, if it identifies any network devices, and I wanted to filter that out only for Ethernet interfaces, based on admin status or operational status, I can do that. And then say add only the managed interfaces for monitoring with interface discovery. This is what I want. So in the stage 4, I have, by default this will be disabled, so I just need to enable it. And I don't want all the interfaces that are selected here, so I just unselect that and I pick Ethernet alone. And if I wanted to add only if the admin status is up, and I can filter that out based on that. And I wanted to pick only if operational status is up, and I wanted to ignore the rest, I can ignore, and I can simply proceed next. So this is how you filter out the interfaces and add only the interfaces that matters. And next, discovery schedule and reports. So your network today might be with just a couple of hundred devices, but in future you might be adding more and more devices, and it can go up to 1,000 or more than 1,000. So after 2 weeks, you had another 50 devices to your network. It doesn't mean that you need to manually add those devices in OpManager. You simply schedule a discovery scan in OpManager, and OpManager will scan the devices that are added to the network in the later date automatically. So I'm going to show you an example for that. So in the schedule, you wanted to do a daily scan or you wanted to do a weekly scan. So you can decide that based on your need, and just mention a time to execute it, and just click on next. Make sure that you provide an email address so that whenever a network scan completes, you will get a report saying how many devices are added, how many are still pending, and so on. And you just simply save this to get it executed on a scheduled time, or you wanted to save and execute it immediately, you can do that as well. Okay, now we understand the entire discovery cycle. And say I wanted to update the interface or device properties with discovery schedule. How do I do that? So this happens, right? In any network, it keeps changing. You will update an IP address of a device. You will upgrade the RAM size, upgrade the or change the hard disk on a server, or you will upgrade exchange version, or on interfaces the name will be updated, the speed updated, and the admin or operational status keeps changing. And you wanted all these to be in sync with your network. Whatever that the monitoring tool monitors should be in sync with the current active network. And all that you need to do to capture the live changes that's happening in the network is you just initiate a scan on the existing devices. So I wanted to do this for the Australia site, and then I put this on a schedule. So at a given point of time, it will scan the entire network for the available devices, and then at any point of time, any changes that happens. So you can define saying that if a new device is added, or if a new device is removed, if a new interface is added, or if a new interface is removed. So you can apply this rediscovery rule as well. So any changes that happens to the existing devices, all the property changes will get updated automatically in OpManager for you. And next, the discovery reports. So these are all the various profiles that's available that I've created in this particular setup. So on the report, you see when was the last scan happened, and which is the administrator who initiated the scan, and how many devices are added, how many are deleted, how many are unmanaged, or how many are still pending, and so on. So I hope you understand the entire discovery process, and you have any questions related to that, please feel free to post your questions, and we have a panelist team who can answer your questions right away. And next, this is again an important case that we see in the technical support team on a daily basis. say you would have experienced this problem many times when you discover the devices, and the primary reasons are because most of the cases when the recommended ports are blocked by the firewall. So we have mentioned all the ports and protocols that we have used in the particular site. That's we have provided the link on the screen, so you can take a look at that, all the recommended ports and protocols. So just make sure that all these ports and protocols are allowed in your firewall, so that you will not have any issues when you discover the devices in OpManager. And the next reason is password. Sometimes there is a typo in the password, so if you identify that there is a typo in the password, just make sure that it is updated. And also there is an effective way to test the credentials on a periodical basis. So you just hit on test credential, and you can add a schedule for test credential as well. So for all the devices, I can just move it to the right hand side, click on next. So I can put this on a schedule basis. I can either test the credentials on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Say for example, I want to do this on a monthly basis because all the Windows devices, the Active Directory, I have set a policy to change the password on a monthly basis. So on every month, if I forgot to update the password in OpManager, that's going to show me an alert or not monitor the performances for the Windows devices. So I do a monthly scan for the respective devices on the first Friday, and I execute this at 8 a.m. in the morning. So if it fails, then it will send out a report to me for the configured email address. Test credential check for Windows servers. So I can generate an alarm and save it, so that it will run a schedule. It will check the credentials for all the Windows servers, and whenever it fails, it is going to generate an alarm for me. So if I forgot to update the password for the Windows servers, I can just go ahead and update the password. If I go to credentials, this is where I will see all the credentials added. I can simply edit the respective Windows credentials and update the password and save it, so that I will not have any problems in the future. That's another way. And this is one more important reason why the devices are discovered as unknown. Say you don't have a template for it. You see, we have 800 plus templates, device templates available. You go to configuration, device templates. So these are all the default device templates are available. If you do not find a device template for, say for example, a radio device, we don't have a template available for radio device. And in that case, if you're trying to add the devices into the tool, and you will simply see that as an unknown device. You see, the nothing is being available. We don't know the vendor, we don't know the category. So simply with the IP address, with the ICMP ping, it will monitor the availability, packet loss, and response time. But apart from that, nothing can be achieved by monitoring this device. So what you have to do is, you just need to make sure that the respective template is added. How do you do that? Go to settings, configuration, device template, and you simply click on add template and provide the name. Say for example, I wanted to create a template for radio device. Then if I don't find the respective vendor, I can add a new vendor here. Let me call that as a radio device as well. Add it. I wanted to update the icon, I can update it. I wanted to set up the category, so let me put this as desktop for now. And here I just query the respective radio devices using the SNMP credential. So once I hit on query, it will identify the object OID for the respective device. So right now I manually add radio device. So in a live environment, you just need to make sure that you query it through the proper SNMP credentials so that the OpManager will fetch the object ID, the device identifier for it. So once it identifies and gets added and associated to the template, you save it, and the next time the radio device is discovered, and you will see that the the radio device, the device template model is associated as radio device, the vendor name is associated as radio device, the category is assigned to desktop, and then you can also add custom snp monitors to, if you wanted to monitor any specific information apart from the availability on the devices. So this is how you create a new device template for the models for which the default device templates are not available. And once the device template is added, in future you add any radio device, you will not see that falling under unknown category. It will be categorized properly. So with that, we are coming to the end of this part one presentation, and we have received a couple of questions that are interesting, and we have answered that to specific users who have raised those questions, and now we have validated some of the questions, interesting questions for the benefit of larger audience, and I would like to transfer this session to Sanjeev, who's a technical expert, and he's going to discuss all the questions that we received today. So I'm just going to hand this over to Sanju. Just give me a quick seconds as the presentation loads. So I'm just handing this over to Sanju to discuss about the questions that we received today. Thank you all for your time.
Hello everybody, this is Sanjeev, a product expert and panelist from ManageEngine. So over this session we have got some interesting questions to go, so let's just review this one by one. First up we have, is Windows 2016 OpManager install supported, and what version of SQL does it support? Yes, we do have the support for installing OpManager on a Windows 2016 box, as well as we have different versions of SQL that are actually being supported if the end user would like to have his DB on MS SQL. So we are going to support right from 2003, 2005, 2008, the R2 machine until the 2016. So we also have a separate document on where we can actually fortify what are the requirements that we have and what are the specs that the op manager can't comply. So we can probably send you over that through the email. And for this, yes, we do have the support for monitoring Windows 2016 server. So the next question is there an easier way to check if my SNMP, WMI, CLI credentials are working? Yes, we do have an option. So let's just get to that page. Just give me a moment. Okay, so when you go to settings and then go to discovery, you have a page called as test credential. So once when you click on add, you will be able to specify what are the devices that you would actually want to. Just get it over to the right hand side, click on next, and you will also be able to schedule as well as generate an alarm in case if it's needed to do a bulk test or probably schedule it at a later time. You can also specify the time frame and then set it accordingly. Okay. All right. I'm just getting to the next question now. Is there a report that could show us the device discovered status post the discovery? So as we all know that we use the discovery mechanism, and that could also comply for reporting purpose as well. So just in case if your management would require a report on what are the recently list of devices that are actually added into your network, that could also be accounted. So when you go to settings and then go to discovery again, you will have a column called as discovery reports. Now, when you go here, you will actually see the list of profiles that are actually being listed here. And when you go to the reports, this is where you actually see on how many number of devices which are added or deleted or unmanaged or the remaining set of pending devices. So added device is something which is already added to the application, and pending devices maybe the reason could be that the device might not be in the network, or it could not be reachable from the OpManager server itself. So those will comply to re-add it once again once when it starts pinging in, and then get the required devices to get added up. So this was the question that was reported. And the next question is, with the help of SNMP, can we monitor the remote systems Windows bandwidth? Yes, of course. SNMP, as you might know, is UDP port based communication. So we use the UDP port 161. So you just need to ensure that the port communication is sufficient for the devices to be communicated from the OpManager server. And with respect to the Windows system bandwidth, it is going to be the interfaces that would be discovered along with the devices during the process of the discovery. And with that, you will also be able to identify the in and out traffic, the interface bandwidth, as well as the packet errors and the discards that are connected through your network. What is the use of CSP? What are the inputs specified in the CSV file format? So with CSP, you will be able to bulk import most of the devices in your network infrastructure. Now, let's say if a user wants to import more than 200, 300 devices at one prod, we already have an option with the IP range. But what if the end user has a CSV file with them that could actually make this task much more easier? So normally with the file format that you have, we already have few set of files for managing and maintaining your IT infrastructure. So with that, you will be able to easily identify and get through the devices which are available in your network. So based on this, you will have a sampler file where you will be specifying the device name or the IP and the display name and then the device type, and then specify the credentials that are actually needed in your network. And once when you browse and then hit on the next button, it's going to automatically discover the devices that are contained in that CSV file and set it across to the right type and category. Which of these is a better option to monitor my Linux Solaris devices? Is it going to be SNMP or CLI? Well, we actually received this question mostly in support. So what we would probably tell as the best fit is that SNMP is, as you might know, it is just an agent-based communication. So the application would completely rely on the response from the SNMP agent. It may be partially right or wrong, but CLI, what we do here is we actually get the output of the command that is stored in one of our configuration file inside OpManager. So it's going to read and write whatever commands that we fit in or we feed in, and then we get the appropriate outputs. So yes, both of this can be used, but the most preferred option would be with the CLI. Is ICMP ping response mandatory for the device discovery addition process? Yes, that is correct. So with ICMP ping, you will have to just ensure that the specific IP address is reachable from the OpManager server, and you will also be able to check if the device is added into the application or not. So all you will have to do is just go to the inventory, and then you will actually see the list of devices that are available in your network. So the other way about, say for example, if you are in a DMZ zone where most of the port based restrictions are taken into account, then you can actually open specific TCP ports alone, where you can actually use the ping using TCP option and then specify what is the port that could be opened based on the firewall policies that you impinge. What are the WMI ports that I need to open for Hyper-V servers? Well, as you might know, WMI Windows Management Instrumentation is purely based on the TCP port communication. So, from OpManager perspective, just ensure that the ports 135, 445, and then the random ports which vary from 5,000 to 6,000 can be open. And for hypervisor, just ensure that you would require the administrative credential to discover the host as well as the VMs that are contained in it. What does add to NCM or add to IPAM SPM in the device page refers to? Well, let's just go check it out. So when you go to settings, and then when you go to the basic system settings, and then when you go to the discovery channel, you will actually find an option here, add to NCM
Yeah.
routers and switches, add to IPAM subnet and switches. Well, this will actually imply that whatever discovery process that you're actually in will also be fed to the NCM, which is the Network Configuration Manager, and the IPAM module, which will be your effective IP address management scheme as well as the switch port mapping. So once when you enable these options and hit the discovery button, these devices will also be a part of the discovery and will be added to these specific modules. So once when you disable this option, you will not have these device IPs from OpManager to be added to the specific NCM or the IPAM module. How do I go about in rediscovering my existing device? Well, I believe this was already mentioned, but let's just get it once again. So when you go to settings and then discovery, you will have an option called as existing devices. So you will be able to select on what are the business views or whether it is a device or whether it is based on the category of your, you know, application, whether it's a server or router or switch, and then go forward with the discovery option. So you will have to go to settings, discovery, and then existing devices option. Well, with that, we have almost come to the end of it. So, in case if you probably would need more help on this, we are always there to help you out. So, with the YouTube channel, you can actually go to the OpManager tech videos, and then we have a readily available document, help.opmanager.com, that would suffice your purpose, as well as we have some interesting conversations going through the forums where we do also have many inputs that the end user provides us and for the rest of the ITOM community. And far apart from it, you can also email us from sales@manageengine.com for any sales purpose. Or if you're trying to evaluate any of our ITOM suite products, you can actually use the eval-itom. And yes, of course, the post sales, the support team. So this would be your email address, opmanager-support@manageengine.com. And you can also give us a call back on the specific numbers that are actually mentioned below. So with that, the next training schedule is proposed on October 3rd. That's probably at 6:30 p.m. GMT with these specific tools that are actually being covered. You could actually be a part of it, and that would also serve as a value addition to the free seminar that we are conducting every week. And we once again thank you for having your time. Take care and have a great day.